G'day ladies and gentlemen, Duckville here. Welcome to a StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm cast. Glad you could join me. It is going to be a Protoss versus Terran today on 1outsG Stronghold. I am pretty excited. You could probably tell in my voice because this particular feature is now working again. The center or follow current unit or currently selected unit or building or whatever command is now back up and running. Finally, this one came back in. I was really hoping that it would be fixed up, you know, like quickly after it became an issue because it was a really troublesome thing to deal with. But I am glad that Blizzard have fixed this one up. So this is, you can now use that particular command on any replay again. So I had a suspicion that it was map related because it seemed to only be a problem on ladder maps. But it seems as if it was actually some kind of I guess like I don't know, a coding command or something like that. Some sort of issue internally in the system not relating to the maps. So it does work on old replays and new replays after the patch that has just come out today. Of course, it is the 5th of March that I am recording this one. But as I said, Protoss versus Terran on a very big map. Should be very interesting because we are cross spots. Up at the top left-hand side is FidesVestri. FidesVestri? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that's Latin, right? Like it's one of these cool names that's Latin. I'm probably going to just pronounce this wrong the whole time, but we're going to go with... I'm pretty sure it's Fides, right? FidesVestri, and it's something about victory? First victory? I can't remember. Someone has to teach me Latin. Anyway, down at the bottom right-hand side, much easier to pronounce than someone who does hang around in my Twitch channel and hangs around and when I'm playing some StarCraft and NS2 and Dota 2 and other stuff like that. It is MetalCore, and he will be our blue Terran down at the bottom right hand side. He's going to be opening up with a CC first here on 1outsG Stronghold, a very popular build for I guess the the Town Hall first build, whether it be a hatchery, a Nexus or a CC, is always very popular on this map, just simply due to the extraordinary size of this particular map. It is, as we've said many times before, it is the largest map in the map pool that has ever been. There has a lot of people kind of think that Whirlwind was bigger. Nope, it was slightly smaller. And as you can see, FidesVestri is going to go the same path, picking up our double assimilators shortly after we already threw down that Nexus at the natural. So things are going to be very economic for both players, slightly favoring MetalCore, just a little bit here. It's not a huge thing to have a difference between a rack CC and like a gate Nexus. There's like the Protoss player can obviously, they can chrono out their probes a lot quicker. But the one thing that you have to be careful with when you Nexus first is that you can be vulnerable to certain attacks, given that you won't have any sentries out, you won't have any warp gate tech or anything like that. Not to mention, because the cyber is slightly delayed if you go Nexus first, or sorry, not slightly, it's a fair whack delayed, and therefore your robo can also be slightly behind. So if your opponent is trying to meta you in some way, then they go, quick banshees and proxy banshees. Like let's say there was a proxy banshee in the middle of the map. A Nexus first can take a fair amount of damage from that, so you have to be kind of careful of that kind of stuff as well. So, but either way, very safe, economic openings here on this very big map. Of course, once you've taken your natural, you've also got this one just down the front. I tend to take this... I like to take this one first as Zerg. I know that sounds really weird, but I actually like to take that one first and then take the third back here. I just kind of feel like it's a little bit easier if you have a little bit of creep spread out here when you're a Zerg player. But for our Terran and Protoss, of course, it's just generally much better whether you're playing TvT, PvP, TvP, or blah blah blah. It's just much nicer to take the backdoor natural, very similar to God's Garden in that regard, if anyone remembers that particular map. So, while we're waiting for things to crank up here, as we can see, we've gone quickly up to a forge for FidesVestri, and I believe, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about doing the forge before the robo, but I don't know. Either way, if you can get your upgrades cranking, which it looks like he is going to be going for, then that puts you in a very solid position through the mid game. And we'll see how that affects our Protoss player here. MetalCore getting a tank out. Nice safe unit there. We've also got a couple of turrets just going up to make sure he is protected properly against oracles. Oracle's also a good choice on this map, I think, because they're very fast units and they allow you to traverse around the map very quickly. One thing that it is important to note is that neither player has actually scouted each other just yet. We can see that, MetalCore's just happy to sit back here. He's going to have a couple of tanks, and even a second factory is coming up, so I don't know, maybe we'll see some mech coming out of our Terran player here today. But yeah, neither player has actually scouted out their opponent, so they're just playing the imaginary player game. And I say that not just for the fact of, that you don't actually know that there's someone else in the game at the moment, but also when you're playing with a little bit less information, you need to be aware of certain what we call imaginary player tactics, whereby, so imaginary player number 1 gets some oracles. We've covered that off with our turrets. So imaginary player number 1 has been beaten. Imaginary player number 2 coming across with some early gateway pressure. We've got some tanks, so that's covered. And then so on. So you get these sort of, like a mental checklist in a way, when you're sort of, when you're lacking a bit of scouting. And I'm sure like everybody has probably thought about this kind of thing. You may not have thought of it in a kind of abstract way like I'm talking about it, but it's pretty much what most people will do when they haven't actually scouted their opponent. Is you got to think, all right. So for FidesVestri, he's got to think, oh, where's that Terran? Okay, he could be dropping. What am I going to do about that? Well, I do have the mothership core prepared for, and it's in a very nice position, so we're decently prepared for drops. What else are we going to do? I need to try and get ahead for the mid game. So we've got upgrades on the way. We've got a Robo Bay also prepared, a Twilight Council. All these cool things are getting prepared here. And he's just ticking off certain things here. He hasn't ticked off everything, which I'm a little bit worried about. Like things like Widow Mines are not checked off for the main base, but that's not to worry. There should be a few units here. But he will be scouting out his opponent very soon. As we can see, one of the observers is on the way across. There is a second and a third observer out on the map. So he'll be able to spot where his opponent is very shortly, as we can see, just floating in. Alright, no CC here. He must be down in the bottom right corner. So, as you can see, things are just sort of slowly going along here. It looks like we will have some kind of mech play here from MetalCore. He does have Banshees coming out. Now, some Terran players do like to get their Banshees very early. You see, a player like Avillo does like to get a lot of Banshees out relatively quickly when he's playing against Protoss. Certain other mech players will also go the same path. Others will just completely ignore Banshees. There are times when you can just say, I don't really need the Banshees at this present time. If your opponent is going for a lot of Stalkers early on, if they're trying to be abusive with Blink Stalkers or anything like that, Banshees aren't the best friend you can have. Other things are far more important, such as the tanks, mines, and Hellbats. So he is just sort of, as we said, covering all bases, literally and figuratively, MetalCore here. But it's also one thing, wow, high-sec auto tracking. I thought I was the only person in the universe who gets this upgrade, but he's going to grab it there. Throws down a few more factories as well, so we will have our Terran player cranking up the production here as both players are playing extremely passively, and we'll see how this goes, because this is a very big map. Let's just quickly talk about the terrain for a moment. Attacking into a mech Terran here is going to be a very bad idea. There's lots of clumped up areas over here. There's also, just these two paths that are relatively wide, so you've got to be careful pushing into those areas. If we see MetalCore move up here and try and take his fourth, then of course he can set up on the high ground here and just try and cover these areas that also protect his third base as well. Alternatively, you can take the fourth down here. I tend to like taking the high ground a little bit better than this low ground base, but each to their own. There can be differences in the way you play, and we'll see how MetalCore wants to expand. But our Protoss across on the other side has taken the initiative, scouting out that his opponent has gone for a third base and is playing relatively passively. You'll see that he's going for mech here in a second. Is he going to actually make it all the way in? Doesn't make it all the way in, unfortunately, but he has also picked up a fourth base very, very quickly, has double Robo cranking out these Immortals as well. So yeah, he does know that yeah, I think he must have seen the tanks or something like that when he scouted through here, but he does know that MetalCore is going for a mech opening at the moment. I do like the addition of 2 Stargates as well. I often think that people just sort of delve too hard into the Immortal tech. I have done a video previously, just I think it's called Duckville, on dealing with mech for Protoss players. If you want to go and have a look, if you've ever had trouble with mech, go and have a look at that video. But one core thing that you have to keep in mind when you're playing as a Protoss against mech is to not go too hard into a particular type of tech. If you go too hard into Immortals, you're going to get EMP'd. A quality Terran player is going to have some ghosts out. Alternatively, they may go into Sky Terran and have a lot of Banshees, maybe some Ravens, and Battle Cruisers will come out, and then Immortals can do nothing against that kind of stuff. So you have to be very careful. I think one of the key things about playing Protoss against mech, especially these days with the recent buff to Widow Mines, is do not underestimate. Of course, there are lots of ways for a Protoss to deal with mech, but do not underestimate. A solid Terran mech player can be very, very dangerous, even to a Protoss. So these sorts of things you really have to keep in mind. But for other sort of ranty stuff about that, go and check out the video, Duckville dealing with PvT mech or something like that. I can't remember. Maybe I'll put it in the description. But anyway, so we can see now that our Protoss is starting to ramp up those Immortals that we can see here. We've got 5 out on the field, a couple more are just popping out now as well. Has shields plus 2 to weapons, 3, sorry, to weapons is on the way. We can see that he does not have Storm yet. I would like to see the addition of Storm and also of Charge. These are a couple of things that can be quite helpful when it comes to dealing with mech. You want the Zealots to be able to jump on top of these tanks as quickly as they can. You want the Storm there to be able to deal with things like Vikings and also the Hellbats on the ground. So having when you see a Terran going for mech like we've seen here, one of the great things that FidesVestri has done is picking up a 4th base very quickly. You need extra gas because you have to crank out these upgrades very quickly. And wow, all right, he's going straight to carriers. 4 carries at a time coming out from our Protoss player up here, and he's well, alright, so we've kind of skipped a phase. Normally I like to kind of talk about dealing with the standard kind of mech issues that you have to deal with, such as tanks, such as, you know, we mentioned Banshees before, Thors can come out, you then get Ravens and Battle Cruisers and things like that. But FidesVestri has actually just skipped the whole lot, and he said, don't worry about that, Mr. Duckville, we're going to go up to 4 carries at a time. Now, like, when you look at this game, you might think, well, carriers, is he throwing this game away? Because carriers, everyone just assumes that carriers are really crappy. We don't really want carriers at all. They die quickly to Vikings. They, you know, they get smashed by Thors in their high impact payload mode, all that kind of crazy stuff that people talk about. But carriers are actually a great response to mech, and I'll show you why in a second. When has he actually gotten out? No, he doesn't. I was going to say, MetalCore probably at this point I would like to see going for some Ravens, and the reason you want to normally go for Ravens is that Ravens can throw out point defense drones to deal with Tempests. They deal with the Stalkers as well, and it just gives you a nice little amount of defense to deal with Tempests and things like that, which is a very common response to mech. But the thing with carriers is they don't get shot down by point defense drones. The interceptor shots don't get hit by point defense drones. So carriers, if you can get them out and get them to a critical mass, carriers, I believe, still have the highest DPS in the game of any single unit. Actually, maybe Oracles might trump that now. But anyway, carriers are really good because they will smash through Thors eventually. Thors are obviously very tanky. They've got a lot of armor. But they can also deal with Vikings. A lot of people think that, you know, Vikings are just going to annihilate carriers every single time. No, they do not. Once you have some upgrades going, normally you kind of want about 7 to 8 carriers and then 2 on your upgrades. We're currently sitting at 011, so I'd love to see a secondary Cybercore here for our Protoss player, but he's not worried about that just yet. But he is going for what is effectively the correct tech here. This is what I generally would advise in dealing with mech, is a carrier-based composition. We said before, you shouldn't ever go just hardcore into the one particular tech, and it maintains the same for carriers. While I've been saying the carriers are, you know, the best, oh my god, at dealing with mech, you don't want to go too hardcore into it, because eventually the Terran will be able to counter it in full. So what you want is a reasonable amount of carriers. I'd normally advise around 8, 9, possibly 10 if you can get them all out in time. You want a critical mass of them before you attack. You also want to have some Templar on the ground for Storm, so you can Storm Vikings, and also you want to have a few Tempests thrown in the back just in case there's some Battle Cruisers around, because Battle Cruiser Yamato Cannon will ruin your day if you're not careful. So we can see the basis of the Protoss there for FidesVestri. Again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, but our Terran player over on the opposite side of the map, we can see he's got Corvid Reactor. We've got a lot of starports now cranking up. We've got a whole bunch of reactors. The fusion core is done. Do we have our Yamato cannon just yet? No, we do not. But what you want to do is, there you go, in that order, guys. Behemoth reactor, then the weaponry fit. If you do the other way around, it's not necessarily as efficient, because by the time your Yamato cannon or weaponry fit, I just don't know why they called it that. Once that's done, and then once the Behemoth reactor is done after, you'll already have a couple of battle cruisers out, and they won't have the extra energy that they get. So it's not the most efficient way of getting those upgrades. But anyway, so what we'll see here from MetalCore is it looks like he's going to go very, very heavily into the Vikings. We're going to have a lot of Thors on the ground as well. As we can see, the Thor count is reasonable at the moment. 6 are out, and they do have 333. Of course, that means everything has 333. The inevitable battle cruisers that will be coming soon will also have that. Durable materials upgrade is also being researched. If you're wondering what this is because you never see it, this is an upgrade to allow the point defense drones of Ravens and the to stay out longer, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head because I rarely see it either, and I actually use it sometimes, which is kind of funny. And then the auto turrets have more armor, is that right? Oh, just extended time for both. Okay, my bad. Terrible caster, lost your passion. But anyway, so he's sort of piecing together what is a kind of an anti-carrier army in a way. You do need a lot of Vikings, so you need some Ravens to Hunter-Seeker missile the carriers as well. If you're wondering why I'm suggesting that, just look at how much they're clumping up. A couple of Hunter-Seekers will smash through carriers like that because they clump up so much. As you can see, lots of ground defense here for MetalCore, but does he have enough to defend the air? It looks like for the moment, with those Vikings coming through, that he will. He's now looking for an angle to engage on the carriers. Perhaps this will be able to smash down some of them, but as you can see, look at the DPS just sniping down some of the Vikings there. Every time you turn around with the Vikings, unless you actually focus firing on the carriers, they're just going to shoot the interceptors, and the interceptors can come back very quickly as the carriers will just swiftly rebuild them. So it's you have to be very careful with that kind of thing as a Terran player. But now we can see that MetalCore, I would like to, is he gonna, I don't think you need to, but I think you could probably throw away these tanks, maybe make a couple of planetary fortresses here instead. I do think that Widow Mines are going to be a really good addition to mech armies when you're trying to deal with run-bys and stuff like that, because if you just throw down a couple of Widow Mines, you'll really just, look at this kind of stuff. The new Widow Mines with their extra damage will tear apart Immortals like this, so I think it is important to keep in mind that Widow Mines are going to be quite useful these days. But now we can see that MetalCore is going to suffer an attack from both sides. A couple of Immortals down here just pushing through. A few of them at the back not actually doing too much, but the planetary fortresses are here to save the day. The carriers, meanwhile, sort of engaging the Vikings. Looks like the Vikings are going to target down one of the carriers. They do go down. The tank is boldly going where no tank has gone before, and another carrier does go down. So MetalCore scoring a few kills here, and you can see those carriers clumping up, and here again is where you would need some of those Templar, and this is what I'm talking about with going too hard into the same type of unit here. We had a really decent count of carriers, but with no storms to storm the Vikings, this is what happens. You lose a lot of the carriers, you have to go back to the drawing board, rebuild them, and well, as you can see, a lot of the Thors went down. We can quickly rebuild the Vikings and kill off all of these units. There's actually no ground units here. You've just got a couple of carriers, a couple of Colossi. They will die very quickly to the 11 Vikings that are on the way. So our Protoss player back at home is still continuing to get some expansions up. We can see his 6 just across to the right-hand side. His 5th has been there for quite a while, but we still do not have +3 to air armor nor shields, which I'm a little bit worried about. Got to keep those upgrades coming. Air units will not survive against 3-3 Viking Battlecruiser and possibly Ghost in the long term, but we'll see what happens here. He's added in some Zealots. It's a little bit of a sign that sometimes the Protoss is not adequately prepared for dealing with mech, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't have those Templar there to storm, which by the way is still not being researched, it means that you will start to fall down to the large amounts of the Zealots that are out and about. but he's still done a decent amount of damage. We see a couple of planetaries have been taken out by FidesVestri. A few battle cruisers are now making their way out onto the field, and we will see what the plan is here for our Protoss player. He did get a whole bunch of carriers out, 7 carriers, and another 7 are on the way. So we're going to have 14. We're still waiting on that plus 3 to armor as well, not to mention shields. But, I mean, MetalCore is just sort of slowly re-piecing that army back. We've got a couple of battle cruisers on the way. I'm not... Where is I think we do need some more starports. Like, I mean, he's not maxed out, but he's also not running out of any resources at the moment. So we either need to make some more battle cruisers, we need to make some ghosts, or we need to make just more Vikings, I guess. Because if he scans and sees that there's a large Protoss army over here with all these carriers, and he will know that he'll need some Yamato cannons, he'll need some Hunter Seekers, possibly some EMPs if he can throw them in as well, because 14 carries are going to be, wow, very, very ouchy to deal with, unless you've got the right composition. So, MetalCore just scanning forwards, we can see he's just checking out what that army is up to. More carriers now entering the fray here. Where are the extras? There they are. Some more are coming about. But we do have the Yamato cannons ready to go for battle cruisers. We've also got some Phoenix being added on for FidesVestri. Surprised about that. Anti-impulse crystals being researched as well. +3 to shields, +3 to armor. There we go. We're piecing everything together here for our Protoss player. More starports are coming up. Stargates, sorry. Have I been saying starports the whole time? I can't remember. I know it's starports for a Terran, I can tell you that. But as you can see, more battle cruisers are just starting to come out for our Terran player as well. A couple more Thors being added in just for that little bit of splash damage that they do, or perhaps for the high impact payload damage that they can do, which is a reasonable amount of DPS when you switch it over to the high impact payload mode. They do a lot of heavy damage on a single target, which is really, really nice for dealing with things like these carriers. But I think in some cases you may want them to splash the damage across the big cluster of these carriers. Look at this. This is an army you rarely get to see. Lots of Phoenix and lots of carriers for FidesVestri. He's got some SCVs coming through that he'll have to clean up. You know, sometimes when I'm playing late game, you kind of recognize when a player is throwing away units. Like, you can see when they're throwing away SCVs, they want to get some more supply. Sometimes I really wish you could just, like, you know, turn off auto attack on some of the units to just let the SCVs go by. It's like, yep, you can send them across, I'm not going to do anything about it. You'll be stuck on 200 supply for a little while. Of course, SCVs will eventually kill stuff, but and even our Protoss is going to throw away some of his units. He's got 79 probes out on the field. Probably want to drop that down to around about 50. You do need max gas coming in, so you know, normally at this stage that's probably about 8 assimilators that should be functioning, and then you should be able to get a decent army out on the field as well. A couple more Stargates also coming up. SCVs coming back to deal with some of the probes that have come across the field. But just looking at the army compositions here for both of these players, 5 battle cruisers, 7 tanks out on the field just in defensive positions at the moment, 22 Vikings, so we've got 8 Thors out as well. So MetalCore is sitting in a very, very comfortable position, I'd say, if he can engage this correctly. You have to be careful about these Phoenix as well, like, and just simply because they will take up a lot of the Vikings auto-targeting when they come along. And I think if the Thors can get into the fight, and as I said before, I would probably switch them over into splash damage mode right now. Here we go, we will have a big battle. Yamato cannon needs to be fired straight onto the carriers to try and limit the carrier numbers. Those mules need to be jumping on to repair stuff as quickly as they can. The Thors are coming out. We can see the Vikings now coming into the fight, trying to shoot down some of the Phoenix. That's that auto-targeting coming into the effect there. And now we can see that the Thors have started to target down the carriers. Very nicely done by our Terran player, MetalCore. Another battlecruiser comes into the fray, and the Viking count is starting to drop. It's at 10, but we still have only a few more carriers left to deal with, and that is pretty much it. What a powerful composition there, just really nicely done. As I said, I would have liked to see some Ravens for Hunter Seekers or some Ghosts perhaps, but at that point, when your opponent is going to engage like that, it's not too much to deal with. So MetalCore survives the fight for now. We'll get his expansions, pulling in some more minerals. We do need to see a lot more minerals coming in because he killed so many of his SCVs, but there we go. Mules are all over the place. We lost a few during the battle because they were here to repair up some of these Terran forces, and I think that MetalCore, with that big victory in that, I guess the battle of Altazim, he's put himself in a really strong position because we're going to have to chrono boost out all these carriers. It's another 12 carriers on the way for FidesVestri, and he'll be trying to this is a point I'm really worried that he's just going straight back into carriers. I kind of would like to see a mix-up of the composition. As we said before, you really want to have just a varying sort of mixture at this point, because the Terran player already has their composition that works. Vikings, battlecruisers, Thors. You don't need to go straight back into carriers and just try and brute force your way in. Imagine you're trying to, you know, kick down a door and then the door's just not working. Well, you know, don't just kick it again. Get a battering ram, get a log, and try and smash through the door instead. Use a different tool. And I feel like if FidesVestri doesn't get some voids and some tempests out, that could be the fate of him, is that this door is not going to be battered down. There is just so much power in a Terran late game mech army. It just has the Yamato cannons. We see the Thors just ripping through those carriers as well. The Vikings are there to provide that support, and it's a very, very strong composition when you get to this point. And one thing I want to add in, the Immortals. At this point, these guys are not going to do too much, because one of like two things are going to happen. The Immortals are going to try and target down the Thors, but they're not going to be able to kill them in time before the Thors get enough damage done. Like, look at that, 7 Thors. These guys are going to be able to take out carriers in around about, if my maths is correct, around about it's 2 salvos from each Thor onto a carrier, and 1 carrier is dead. Whereas the Immortals are going to have to really target down the Thors very quickly. Like, they do that bonus damage, which is really nice, but the Thors are going to get off a couple of shots, and it could turn the tide. And then once the Thors are dead, what are these guys going to do? They're going to march forwards on their little stubby legs, and they're not going to do too much, because there will be a large air force here for MetalCore. But as we said before, it's just a little bit worrying when you're playing against a Terran and you use a very, very static kind of lineup of units, you know. So have to be careful of these kinds of things. Now, has this base gone completely undetected the entire time? Yes, it has. So base up at the top right hand side has not been seen by FidesVestri the entire game, but not to worry. He's got a DT out, scouting out this base. He's probably wondering, where is my opponent? Battlecruiser comes across to deal with a pylon here. We've got some more probes that are being sacrificed to the Terran gods. Here they come. Gonna see if they can get any damage done, but you would assume that there would be absolutely 0 damage done by these probes. Just making some space for the Protoss army here. So one thing that we do see here from FidesVestri that I do like is that he is using a whole bunch of proxy pylons. It's a really good idea just to throw these around the map so that you can resupply as quickly as you can. What you do see it quite a lot after big battles in Mech versus Protoss is you see the Protoss resupply on Stalkers. And Stalkers can do really well in some fights. If they're fully upgraded, they can do damage to the battlecruisers and they can slowly take them down. But that is one thing that perhaps might work out here for FidesVestri. But one thing he's done here is finally adding in some Tempests. We've got 5 Tempests on the way. These guys should be able to add in that extra little bit of damage if he can target down the battlecruisers with the Tempests. Of course, the Tempests at this stage are going to be doing, what is it, 95 damage to massive air? Do I remember correctly? Yes, 95 damage to massive air units when they fire on them. So that good old kinetic overload is pretty good. But here we go with MetalCore pushing up. He has decided it is time. We are now going to push forward and try and clear up some of these external bases that our Protoss player has. I think he hasn't fully scouted through this one side of the map, but I mean, he's gonna be able to recognize soon that his opponent does not have too much of an economic background behind all of this. Whereas for our Terran player, he's still expanding. He's taking another base. We would love to see him float a command center over here as well. But here we go, this could be the battle to end all battles here. That's like Endor in Star Wars. Here we go. Immortals on the ground are all clumped up. There's a whole bunch of Immortals just at the back there that are getting absolutely nothing done. Battle cruisers being shot down by the carriers, but the Vikings have just torn apart everything up in the air. The Tempest have also been removed, and that is going to be it. That is simply it. There's that Stalker resupply that I mentioned. Carriers are gone. Immortals are now going to be gone as well. I think MetalCore just needs to bide his time here, be very careful. Don't want to push too hard. As I said, the Stalkers can do work, but yeah, I wouldn't rely on them to switch it at this stage. Dropping down some mules to make sure he can repair the battle cruisers. There you go. Control click, right click, or just right click the repair thing. But MetalCore, this game's done. I would say he's got this one in the bag. I don't think there's any way, unfortunately, for Protoss play to come back. If you kind of want, for the Protoss players, as I mentioned, I kind of feel like staying on a very static composition is not the greatest thing to do against mech. We can see here, this is something a little bit more useful. You've got Stalkers. This is a point where you'd want some more Void Rays and carriers, but Immortals, Tempest, and then some Templar here would be a really nice mix. You can feed back the battle cruisers, you can storm the Vikings, and then you're good to go. Well, that's it, because there's nothing else here. This is just a Sky army at this point, so this is a little bit more like if you could switch the Immortals for Void Rays. This would be a beautiful army to use at this stage. The Tempests are going to provide that firepower against battle cruisers. The Immortals are going to, well, the Void Rays, if we call them Void Rays, would be powering down a lot of those Vikings. The Templar are here for some storms, but I just think this could be a little bit too late, but we'll see, because MetalCore is, he's not wanting to push over just yet. And we've spoken about the very kind of static composition of the Protoss player, but as I said, I still would like to see Ravens and Ghost thrown in here to this mixture that MetalCore has. But as you can see, Stalkers fanning out to the sides. Where are the feedbacks on the battle cruisers here? I'm wondering what the hell FidesVestri is up to. But the Stalkers are now coming across, the Ravens coming in, throw down a point defense drone or two. There we go, there's a Hunter Seeker missile. The Vikings are now going to drop down to try and deal with the Immortals on their ground. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but oh well, they will get some damage done, but not before the Immortals cut through everything. MetalCore has... what is he... I'm not too sure about this situation here. The Immortals need to go on a rampage. They need to clear out bases. They need to head up here, check out these 3 bases and make sure they are clear, and then he needs to get that air army back together. Carriers, Void Rays, a couple of Tempests and some Templar, and actually use the Templar for some feedbacks and some storms, but I don't know. As we can see, MetalCore just starting to piece everything back together. Here are these support units here. The Ravens are now being added in. You want to drop Hunter Seekers on top of those Immortals, and you also want to throw down a couple of point defense drones for the Stalkers, and then you're good to go. There shouldn't be any more problems after that, but FidesVestri is mining very little at this point. His economy is now dropped down, as we can see, just a couple of hundred of each resource in the bank, and that is a little bit worrying there for the Protoss player, but here we go. Immortals are going to be fired on by the Hellbats, literally. As we can see, the Blue Flame is getting a little bit done, but the Hunter Seeker now coming out. Nice separation, really nicely done to split that. But MetalCore survives for the moment. Of course, the big thing here is that FidesVestri has not scouted out these bases. These secret bases that should not be secret at this point are keeping MetalCore in a decent position here. I know that looked bad for a minute, and it was kind of like, wow, what exactly was going on there, MetalCore? But he's still in a good spot. He's got lots of Ravens, he's got Vikings back out, Battlecruisers starting to come back out as well, and he's 182 supply. I mean, there you go. There you have it, 182 supply against 75 supply of our Protoss here. But FidesVestri unable to build anything at the moment, so his army is going to stay at 48 units for the moment. Or 48 supply of units, so there's not too much he can do until he resupplies that bank, gets some more carriers or some more Void Rays out, but at the moment he's busy just trying to make sure everything is stable when it comes to his economy. And MetalCore, oh, there you go, GG. That is going to be it here for our Terran versus Protoss game. It was a really interesting mech composition there from MetalCore, just like kind of adapting to things. Just a few slight adaptations would have been nice to add in there. And of course, for our Protoss player, we would have loved to have seen a much more balanced composition consisting of Void Rays, Templar, and Tempest through that mid game, instead of just saying let's go for carriers, you know. And that's what a lot of people do. So try not to make that mistake if you're playing against mech. It is a very, very underrated composition in some circumstances. In the right hands, mech can be very deadly. But I hope you all enjoyed that match. I'll catch you all next time. Here, as you can see, 47 damage to bio units and then the 34 damage against other standard targets. His storms have also been wonderful, just spreading them out across the battlefield, doing really, really nicely there. And for minigun, he's been sticking with a much more